I'd like to welcome you to the annual ICS faculty panel on improving your graduate school applications. The chart up on the screen is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Current Population Survey 2013 and shows earnings and employment rate by educational attainment. Starting down here with less than a high school diploma, very high unemployment, very low wages, going up through bachelor's degree, master's. The professional degrees are the veterinarians and lawyers and dentists and things, and then a doctoral degree. And as you climb the food chain, one thing that is very apparent is that your unemployment rate drops dramatically and your lifetime earnings increase dramatically. And so all of you should plan to climb as far up this food chain as your smarts and determination will take you. What's not apparent from this chart, but all of the faculty can tell you, is that the other thing that happens as you climb up the food chain, your assignments and duties become much more challenging, much more responsible, and much more interesting. With an associate's or bachelor's, you might be a project team member. With a master's, you might be a project team leader. With a PhD, you might be the chief technical officer or in a think tank someplace. And so again, the higher you can climb up this, the better. We're going to, let me, before we begin, briefly review how we're going to do this. Daniel Fabrega, the UCI coordinator of outreach, recruitment, and retention, first will give a brief overview of UCI grad school prep support, and you're all well recommended to his office. I'll then introduce the faculty panel. They each have an assigned question, and they'll give about a 60-second teaser on their question, discuss it a bit, and then I'll open the floor, or the panel to questions from the floor from you. At about 12:35 or so, I'm going to shoo the faculty out so that the graduate students can talk honestly and openly. And we'll have a graduate student panel of some graduate students that have very kindly agreed to give you their experience on what they actually did here. So without further ado, let me introduce Daniel Fabrega. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I am losing my voice. 'Tis the recruitment season, so 'tis season to lose my voice. My name is James Brigg, I work in Graduate Division. I'm here to talk about the resources offered through the Graduate Resource Center for undergrad students interested in grad school. Who here knows where the Graduate Resource Center is? Some people. Who here knows where Gateway Commons is? Gateway Study Center. It's called Gateway Study Center now. So it's across from Langston Library, right next to Aldrich Hall. It's the third floor. Things that the Graduate Resource Center does for undergraduate students are we have writing consultants. They are paid upper level graduate students that can look over your essays for you. So you should get your application essays looked over by many people, including your faculty member, one of your friends from the class, you can send it to your parents, but also use the writing consultants as well, because as many eyes as you get on it, the better you can do it. And I recommend when you show it to your advisor, it's almost complete. So be a good middleman to go to the writing consultants. Also, they do a range of workshops, including graduate preparation. I left this flyer on that table over there. And so starting next week, we do an overall workshop on graduate school. We do a workshop on the statement of purpose and personal history statement, most importantly talking about what are the differences between the two. And then we prepare people for the graduate fair. So UCI is having the graduate fair on November 4th. And so that's a great day. There'll be over 200 institutions represented. They'll be from 10 to 2 on Ring Road. Do you guys all know where Ring Road is? Yeah, we 10 to 2 Ring Road. It doesn't actually come over here to the sciences. It's more by Aldrich, but you guys should definitely check that out in between classes or if you have a break. It's a great way to get your questions answered by the schools that you're looking to apply to. And then I think that's everything I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's thank Daniel. I'm going to introduce the faculty panel briefly, and I'd like to ask you to wave to the students as I read your name. We have Sandy Irani, from computer science, former computer science chair, works in algorithms. Wes Johnson from the Department of Statistics, who's vice chair of graduate affairs. Sharad Mehrotra, computer science and vice chair of graduate studies. Judy Olson, informatics, computer supported cooperative work. Okay. Amelia Reagan, computer science, networks, and algorithms. Hal Stern, the ICS dean from statistics. Jessica Utz, statistics and chair. And we hope we'll be joined by Nalini Venkata Subramanian, computer science, multimedia, computer networks, and distributed. And I seem to have...
Jillian Hayes, Vice Chair of Grad Affairs for Informatics.
Oh, okay. And I apologize if it somehow got dropped off my list. So I'm going to ask the...
Or Judy Olson. Yeah. Whatever.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the faculty not to give answers to the questions, but just sort of teaser sound bites in about 60 to 90 seconds that will be a spur for further discussion. So please. Please.
Okay, so my question is, choices. How are PhD and master's applications different? Should I apply to an MS or to a PhD program, and why? And how do MS and PhD programs differ in the admissions process and financial aid decisions, and what I can do once I get there, after I graduate, and how long will each take? So I'll just give you one quick teaser, which is that in our program, PhD students are supported and master's students are not. So if you want to be supported with a TA job or a research job, you would want to be in the PhD program.
Thank you.
That works. All right, my question is, what did they look for in making admissions decisions? I assume by they mean us. Okay, so questions about things like the relative importance of GPA versus GRE, the letters of recommendation, what kinds of scores of GRE do you need to have, should you study, and does it hurt to take time off, and do they care about community college GPA? My answer to all of these is it depends. So my teaser for you is that you should contact the people like us at the different institutions that you're thinking about applying to and ask them these same questions. Probably the answer is lots of these things do matter in various ways depending on the program that you're thinking about.
So my question is related to research experience and publications, mainly about is it necessary and how important it is. And I guess my teaser would be, it really depends on what program you're applying to, master's versus PhD. If you're going to undertake a PhD, you better know that you like research, and you better know that you have some, reasonable skills in the research. But otherwise, it probably doesn't matter.
All right, my question, letters. Who should I ask to be my letter writers? And lecturers, industry folks, how many do I need? What can I do to get stronger letters of recommendation? And the only thing my letter writer knows about me is that I got an A in his or her class. Is that enough? Well, it's better than a B. And I guess I will just say that this is from the perspective of applying to PhD programs, for which the letters are much more important than for the master's program. Your transcript is fairly limited in terms of answering the question, can this person do research? It's not that, it's fairly correlated with your GPA, but it's not that closely. So people look to the letters to answer the question, will this person succeed in research?
Thank you. And we've just been joined by Nalini, so
Hi everyone.
Let
We
the
should
rest
give
of,
her
I'll let
time
the
to
rest
read
of
the
the
question.
panel
Yeah.
go.
So maybe you want to go ahead and then.
Sure, I'll go. He's
All
going.
right, so I guess I'm next. Okay, so my question is finances. Can I get paid to go to grad school for a PhD? Almost always the answer is yes. Most schools will support your PhD stay completely, either through PA or through readerships or through research funding. For masters, traditionally the answer is no, but there are opportunities sometimes that do occur. One more quick thing from finances, I think you should watch out for opportunities such as fellowships which are out there. There are a large number of opportunities, especially for diversity, for women and so on, minorities and so on. There are lots of different opportunities. NSF also has a program of its own where if you're doing extremely well and you're an entry student, you can apply. So lots of these fellowships are targeted for people who are just entering into grad school. Okay, the next part of the question was, let's see, can I plan to work half-time for a PhD program? Well, depends. My answer would be, even if you intend to do that, I would rather not show that, because I think it works negatively in that sense. Often what happens is when you are in the PhD program and your PhD ends up being collaboration with the industry, then it is automatic that sometimes some people end up doing a half-time thing. For a master's, it's perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. Yes, master's and half-time is okay.
So the question that I have is, what does it take to get into the top tier schools, and how? There's a little bit another question about how I should choose where to apply, but what if I apply only to top tier schools and they all turn me down? So this is a little bit like applying to college, which you all did successfully since you ended up here. So there's a reach school and a target school and a safe school and that kind of thinking. That's relevant here as well. It's a little better because you kind of know what you want to study, you know places that might be good at it, your faculty can help you find places that might be good at it. I think you already heard a little bit of this. Letters and research are going to be very important for your PhD admission. But the top schools are looking for letters from people they ideally know, that is, so good people, and evidence that you can do research. So more later.
So my question is, crossing fields, what about interdisciplinary options? What are good interdisciplinary combinations for computer science in grad school? Will it hurt for grad school to apply to a grad school in different discipline, like engineering or music? Does having a minor improve chances of admission? How much, of any, and should I get a master's or PhD in computer science if I plan on getting an MBA and going into management? Well, the general issue of cross-disciplinary education is kind of what the world's all about these days. So in statistics, it used to be that you would do math and then you would do math stat, and you didn't really need to know anything about biology. But in computer science and statistics these days, it's really good to have some other background besides computer science, a place to apply the discipline. And the main thing you want to do, though, in addition to having this cross-disciplinary background, is to do really well in the fundamental courses in your field. Because when we look at applications, we look at people's math and statistics first, and then we look to see how they're going to do, what else it is that they have to offer beyond that.
Thank you. And now we'll come back to Lily.
Okay. So my question is, how can I decide which schools and programs to apply for? And so I guess to some extent it differs on whether you're trying to apply for a master's or a PhD, but I think the answer to this question requires some soul searching on your part. Why are you going into grad school? Why are you going into the PhD program? What is it that you might want to do? Are you looking for a career in academia? Are you looking to go into a research lab? At some level, I think, if where you go to grad school and who you work with, which area you work in, is dictated by what you think you might want to do or what options you think you might want to have open when you finish with your graduate school. And to me, working as an undergraduate with some faculty on a research project perhaps can give you some idea of whether you like the research process and whether you want to apply for the master's or the PhD program. And to some extent, the area that you're interested in will dictate which schools you apply to, because there are certain schools that have very good graduate faculty in certain areas. So for example, if you want to do operating systems, you might go to a certain area. If you want to do distributed systems, you'd go to a different area. If you want to do machine learning, you might go to a different school. I'm not naming which schools are the best and the worst. We're good in everything. UCI. But I think the general idea is that you're really looking, if you're looking for a PhD, at some level you're looking for the school's depth and visibility and faculty in that area. It says, should I visit the school? I think you definitely would help if you do. But I think it's more important to visit with the potential faculty that you might be interested in working with, because the graduate student advisor relationship is something that lasts for a while. If you don't like working, if the work styles may be something different, you might say, I want to do machine learning, but this advisor here in this school A does not seem suited to my style, school B seems suited to my style. And I think you should use the same logic that you try for the best schools, but you also try for certain other schools because the competition's it's a competitive process at the end of the day.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite the faculty to chime in and discuss the points that have been made and offer more pearls of wisdom if you wish.
So one of my important things, I guess, I always like to tell you, you should really talk to a faculty member if you're going to apply to graduate school. Hopefully it's someone might be someone you're already working with and doing research with, but even if it's not, if you've gotten to whatever your junior year and you're thinking about this, I always say this, I can't speak for anyone else, but I would talk to anyone who is interested in going to graduate school in statistics. And they didn't even have to be at UCI. They could call me up and I would talk to them about it because we all believe passionately in our fields and want to encourage people. And so you're here, we have very strong faculty across the board, across different areas. You should go talk to someone and get your own personal counseling session.
And I'd like to welcome Judy Olson.
Oh, thank you. It was the UCI medical system and the 55. Kept me away from here, see?
Or is there any question? I guess we can chime in, it's open. All right. So I think I want to build a little bit more on what Hal said and what Nalini said as well. So as you're preparing for your grad schools, and especially those of you who are undergrads or even the ones who are MS here, are there any master students here or anybody with the MS? Okay. So even for you, the same thing applies. I think getting an opportunity to go and work with the faculty, basically, in the context of some research project or whatever it might be, is very, very useful for a variety of purposes. It enables you to get experience with research. I think Nalini mentioned that already. And it enables you to find your passion essentially as well. But equally importantly, probably maybe more importantly, it enables you to get a very detailed letter of evaluation. So it goes back to the previous questions. There was some other answer to the question that what matters a lot. A recommendation from a faculty about your potential for doing research really, really, really matters at the end of the day. It's probably as important, if not more important, than almost every other criteria which is out there. So I actually think that if you get an opportunity to go and work with the faculty, one more quick thing, maybe it's self-serving to some degree. So
come work for Sharad.
Exactly. That's I was going to say that, because a lot of faculty have special dedicated funds meant for undergrad students. Like these are called REUs, so research experience for undergrads. And so it's a good way for you to get some money as well. And furthermore, you can kind of get an experience in terms of research. And the money is relatively serious money, better than the work study money for sure. So it's actually a very good opportunity in every possible way. You should try and explore that as an opportunity.
It also gives you a sense of whether you like research or not. So one of the big questions, I think most of us are speaking from the perspective of the PhD program because that's kind of where our hearts are.
And we filter students for the PhD program.
Yeah, but a PhD may not be for you. I mean, the attrition rate in PhD programs is roughly 50% because a lot of people get into research and realize it's not for them, or they don't like it, or their talents aren't suited for it. So it's better to get that information ahead of time. Look, I tasted research, it's not for me, I'd like to go into industry. If that's the case, a master's degree is for you. You should really only go into the PhD program if you're interested in doing research, because that's sort of ultimately what it's all about.
At this point, I'd like to open the floor to questions for the panel. So if any of you have questions, we'll take your questions. Please.
Do you have any recommendations for how to get on to do research with different professors? I've had difficulty, and as a transfer student, I'm short on time. And it seems like I can't find professors that are doing research or are willing to take undergrads.
I think all professors would be doing some research in some topic which you can find from their web pages. It's a matter of matching the interests and the availability. The best way, I've had students just send me an email saying, I'm an undergrad, I'd like to do a research project. Sometimes if you're taking a class from some professor and you really like the class, chances are, especially if it's a senior level class or it's a starting grad class, chances are that's the area they're working in. So you might ask them, are there opportunities for, master's students or undergrads in
And
this
find
area?
the PhD students, because, I have a dozen undergrads at any time working with me. Realistically, that means they're not working directly with me all day, every day. They're working with my PhD students. So if you find faculty don't have enough time to work with you directly, you can often work through a PhD student. If you do well with them, then they're going to make the time for you.
Well, when you talk to them, make sure you come and say, here's the skill set I have. Here's what I could do to help you, not just, I'm going to do research.
So I'm looking specific, just to answer that, looking specific for two really good programmers who are undergrad students.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, me too.
How beneficial would you say Europe is to us?
Could you speak up, please, and everyone ask you a question so that
how
the entire
beneficial would you say Europe is to your application for a PhD program?
Did you do well in it?
Sorry?
Depends on if you did well or not.
Okay.
So if you do UROP and you do well, especially if you somehow manage to get on a publication or something, it's really valuable. If you do UROP and you flake out and your faculty member is aggravated with you, it's really detrimental.
That's a good.
But Europe is, what we've been talking about is getting a research experience. So Europe is the undergraduate research opportunity program here. You can get some funding, but you're working with a faculty member, and that needs to be a positive for you, hopefully positive for them. They'll write a letter, so it should be positive.
One more quick thing I want to add. So a lot of universities have recently started something called internships for undergraduates. Like we ourselves have also started something similar. You should explore, but that gives you a great opportunity for exploring research in the summer months. So that should be another thing that you guys should explore.
You mean internship?
Internships of summer outside.
In a company or
no, I'm talking about university. I'm talking about university. Research internships. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, research.
Yeah, so sometimes if you want to work in group X in university Y, they may actually be looking for summer interns to do certain programming tasks. Or, I know all of us are. So that would be a good way for you to get a feel for the place, for the faculty, for the group, and decide whether that's some place you would want to apply and you could see yourself spending the next 5 years or 6 years or more there.
Your question.
So recently there's been a huge online movement for online courses like with Coursera and edX. How do those courses and how well somebody does then affect their application?
I think it only matters if you're not a computer science undergraduate and you're applying to a computer science, maybe a master's program, then it probably matters. But for computer science students, there's no harm. There's lots to be learned out there, but it's not going to help.
I know research experience is important when you apply to a PhD program, but I wonder, is it also a big plus if I would apply to a master program?
I think it's something of a plus, but it's not necessary, right? It's great, but it's not necessary at all.
It's actually, it also depends a little bit. So like if you apply to a professional master's program, like you want to go get an MBA, for example, let's say, or even some of the masters in more technical fields that are professional programs, they're going to be looking more for work experience than they are for research experience. But if you're applying to a master's that's more heavily research focused, then they might care about the research.
They're really different questions. The master's question that's asked most often is, will this person be able to come here and successfully complete this program? And the evidence for that can easily come from how you've done as an undergraduate. Whereas the PhD is trying to answer a very hard question, which is, will this person be successful in research, which is nearly impossible to ask unless there's some evidence from research.
Yeah, so, and I also wonder, will community develop preference to the ones who have research experiences in the master program, for example, in our school and in the statistics department or ICS department?
Yes, I think definitely.
No,
If you have research, if you have a research,
for masters, I think she's asking masters.
No, if it's good, it's not going to, you should be doing research if you're enjoying doing research, not because it will help your master's application. On the other hand, it may set you apart. We got 1,642 applications for our master's program last year, and we have approximately 60 slots.
So I thought your
So
question was, if I did research as a master's student, does that help
No,
me with my
it's not a
PhD?
question.
No? Is that your question? Or
We're getting into the master's.
getting into the master's?
Into the masters.
So the other thing I think lots of people in the systems area look for is industry experience. So if you've done actually company internships, or if you have some industry experience, it counts because it says you have a certain level of systems maturity to apply to a grad program. And if you've done well in industry, I think that's also a plus. So a profile of students that actually sometimes are very attractive is someone who has a master's, someone who has some industry experience, will definitely, or someone who has some research and someone who has some research experience while they were doing their master's or their undergrad. So if you're, all those summer internships that you might have spent with industry is also very helpful. So you should gain from that and highlight that in your applications.
Let me also add that if you have experience like that, or if you have research experience, when you ask somebody to give you a letter of recommendation, give them help. Give them a little bullet set of things you've done, some of which they know about, some of which they don't. And so they can add to the letter of recommendation.
There was a question over here, please.
You guys said the attrition rate for PhD is 50%. Did any of you guys take the master's route and then get a PhD? Because I'm kind of in a weird spot of not knowing which one I want to do. I'm doing research right now. I feel a little confused in the research I'm doing, but I also love learning and exploring new ideas, so I'm afraid of applying for a PhD and not enjoying it. So what would you guys recommend?
One of the things is, because of the finances of it, is if you're not sure but you have an interest in PhD, you would probably want to start on the PhD side because they get funded and master's students generally do not. So, it would not be, sound right if you know you're not interested in PhD to really start there just for the money. But if you actually like learning, the pursuit of new knowledge, that's kind of what the PhD is about. So I'd certainly encourage you to try it, for sure.
And most of the PhD students who don't finish leave with a master's degree. Okay. So there's something gained along the way. You usually have a degree to show for it.
Also, if you're not sure about grad school, you don't have to apply now. You can always go and work. And this is really common in lots of other fields. This is the way I did it. I went and worked for 3 years as a consultant, and it was the best choice I could have made. I find the students who come into the PhD program who have worked in industry in between tend to be more mature, more responsible, a whole bunch of other things. It helps them to get into the program to have worked, all those things. So if you're not sure, don't make yourself suffer. You can always go make money for a little while first.
And it's a good point because several of us worked. I worked before I went to graduate school.
I worked through my graduate school, actually.
That might be harder.
That was harder. It was a longer period.
So when you send faculty contact email for PhD application, what would you like to see in the email? Like interest or...
Don't call me sir first.
Yeah,
dear sir, I'm going to delete it.
So sending impersonal notes to faculty members is worth nothing. We hit delete. Delete, delete. We get lots and lots of those. And dear sir is an indication it's got to be impersonal, right? And so I would contact faculty members relatively sparingly and only with people you really want to make contact with. And if they don't respond, don't take it personally, because it could be they got 50 or 100 that week and you got lost in that sea of other people's emails. So do not get your feelings hurt if we don't respond, but make them personal to an individual, not to just some professor somewhere.
And if you have read something about their work,
Yeah.
that certainly helps. I mean, if you can add a couple of sentences about why something that they did was interesting to you, it shows that you've taken the trouble to do that. And don't mass email faculty, because I think faculty talk to each other sometimes. They say, we got all of these emails, and sometimes, you see an interesting student, but you say, I'm very interested in your field, but you send that to 20 different faculty.
In different fields.
In different fields.
Well, or when I get one which says, Dear Dr. Latham, I would love to come work under you at the University of Texas. Further questions from the audience, please.
When you get letters of recommendation, do you just look at letter of recommendation from teachers, or do you look from TAs, or is there...
Research faculty is what you want.
Okay.
Definitely not TAs.
Definitely not TAs, but research faculty.
If you worked in industry, then a manager's or an ex-manager's letter of recommendation indicating how responsible you were or how well you did, you know, that's
Yeah, but that should not be the only
But
that.
you
That
really,
shouldn't be
and
the
probably
only
only
one.
one of those,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they don't
Right.
really tend to know how to write for graduate school.
Yeah.
There's a question at the back.
So for PhD applications, having an email conversation with a potential faculty member from different schools, does it provide you any leverage as opposed to people who do not have any conversation with faculty members? Or
Depends on what's in the conversation. I mean, if indeed you know what this person is doing, and you know how you would fit and how you could add to it, that would be a plus. But it shouldn't be, you know, impersonal. Again, you just have to do the background work to make sure that you are going after the people that would actually fit what you'd like to do.
And if you had a real conversation with someone, and you should mention it in your statement that I've already talked to Professor X and I'm interested, because then when the committee looks at the application, if it's competitive, one of the things that's going to happen is they're going to say, this person's mentioning you, are you interested in them?
So much better to meet in person than the email.
But I think the other point should also be noted that even if you have not had a conversation with the faculty, we actually evaluate the cases very properly. And also another thing is true, that we'll almost never make an offer unless we've had a chance to communicate with the student in any way. So many times the conversation is not started by the student but by us, by sending an email and saying, are you interested in actually coming to UCI? So I think it's good to send emails to faculty, but again, going back to the same thing, don't inundate the faculty with all kinds of emails. That usually doesn't serve as much of its purpose. If you can target exactly the set of, let's say, 2 or 3 faculty whose work you're really interested in, that's good enough as an initial contact. And people, when they are interested in the application, they will communicate with you. So at that time, you should be very forthcoming as to what your interests and so on are. So we always reach back.
We have time for one more question for the faculty. Please.
So this is regarding research projects in general. Can they be started at any point during the year, or is there no?
You can start it and then get, you know, independent study credit for it in the next quarter, right? If there's a good match and you want to continue doing it. Yeah, come talk to us.
At this time, we're going to change to the graduate student panel, and I'm going to shoo the faculty away so that they So we'll go ahead and get started. Could you introduce yourselves first, please?
I'm Michael Bannister. Many of you have probably met me as a TA in some class. I'm a 5th year theory student. This is my final year in the PhD program.
Hi, I'm Ankita Ratturi. I'm a PhD 5th-ish year student in the informatics department. I think I may have encountered some of you, I'm not totally sure. But I do work in green IT, so environmental systems and software engineering.
Great, thank you very much for being here. Could you briefly, in 60 or 90 seconds, sort of say what you did to get here?
So I have a weird path. I actually applied under the master's program here and got invited to switch my application over to the PhD program. So kind of a weirder situation, so that can happen, but I wouldn't count on that. I think that's kind of an anomaly. But did well in my undergrad. My undergrad was a joint bachelor's master's, so I did come in with a master's already. Yeah, build up relationships, I think, with faculty members so that you get the strong letters of recommendation. On the weird side, I did not have any research coming in. I also didn't have a degree in computer science or any computer science background. So again, kind of a weird situation, probably not applicable to most of you. Maybe yours is better.
Unfortunately not. Mine's also a weird situation. I was actually an international computer science student, so I moved here after doing like an odd 3-year undergrad. And so I got here by cold calling professors and then having my ranty email about how much I love computers being passed on from professor to professor until somebody was like, oh, I'm the person you're looking for. And that's the professor I now work with. So I came here originally for a terminal master's, and then after I finished my master's by research, I was strongly encouraged to stay on for the PhD, which is why I'm sort of like 3rd or 5th year PhD, depending on how you count it.
And before I open it to questions, could you both briefly discuss a burning question I know everybody's concerned with? How did you go about getting your letters, and talk to us a little bit about letters?
So yeah, I think the letters is probably one of the scariest parts. And by the time I was going to get the letters, I already knew exactly who I was going to ask for letters from. They were the people that I'd taken like 7 courses from and done well in their courses, or that, you know, I'd hung out in their office hours a lot and really knew me. And one faculty member already, you know, kind of said, hey, when you're looking for letters of rec, you should ask me. It was still awkward to actually ask, because, I mean, you are knocking on their doors and you're saying, hey, will you write a letter of rec for me? And I've seen situations with other students where it didn't go really pretty. The famous one I know is someone said, the professor said, I can write you an honest letter if that's what you want. so don't get one from that person if that happens. Ask other ones. But I think it's like, you know, I mean, you probably know a lot better because you've read them, but I get this feeling that not all of your letters of rec are going to be awesome letters of rec, and some of them are going to be, this person got an A in my class. And that there's not much more you can say because you don't have that much time to really build a deep relationship with 3 or 4 faculty members. But at least try to get one where they actually know you, I think. And at this point, it might be too late for most of you, but hopefully for the junior, you can do that.
So one of my recommendation letters for my master's program for the first round was not a professor in my department at all. I'd never taken a class with a professor, but I've been on several sort of like student committees and different extracurricular committees through the university with this professor. And so they knew my work, and they were sort of like an indirect mentor for me when I was an undergrad. And so through that process, I asked him if I could get a letter of rec, and that was nice because it sort of rounded off my application letters. The other 2 was one person who I actually did do kind of research with. I don't know if I can call it research, but I guess it was kind of research with. And then the other was from, because it was a very small school, it was a very small department, I managed to get my department chair to write me one because, you know, I was on a million committees and volunteering for a million things. But, you know, that depends on how much coffee you want to drink every day. The second round of applications from sort of the master's to PhD transition was a lot more straightforward. I pretty much asked my committee members for my master's thesis, and so that kind of worked out reasonably and easily. But in both occasions, even though they knew me and they had an idea of what I did, I still needed to give them the sort of like, here's what I've been up to. And so as opposed to giving them my entire resume, I sort of like figured out what the things that I thought were the coolest, but I still gave them a full resume, but I also sort of like highlighted the ones that I was pretty proud of and pretty excited about that I thought would make me a strong candidate for a particular university. Because they're gonna write a letter for each university. So with one, I knew I wanted to highlight one thing, so I'd highlight that one. And so I spent a lot of time with them in that process, but that's not always possible. So, yeah.
As long as we're on the topic of letters, I should mention one point that came up in the faculty discussion about getting a letter of recommendation from industry folk. And they said, yes, it's a good idea, probably no more than one. So when I applied to graduate school, I got a letter from industry folk, one. You do need to coach the industry folk a little bit about the kind of letter that they should write. They want to write a letter that says you have good critical thinking, you're creative, all of the qualities you will need to succeed in research. But when I was spent many years as a professional programmer, I would ask each industry person for a letter of reference when I left. Some of them said things like, his grammar is impeccable. His attendance is perfect. That's great to get a job, but it won't get you into graduate school. So coach them about, okay. With that, I'll open the floor to questions.
One more point on the letters. You and your friends might be asking the same faculty members for letters. If you're applying to the same schools, keep in mind that those are going to probably be compared. So you might want to think about who you ask for letters of rec based on who else is asking them for letters of rec. This was actually advice given to us when we were doing this undergrad, that we were all applying to competitive schools. and think about that. That you're being compared with the other people getting the letters of rec program.
Question.
When you go to ask a professor to write you a recommendation, do you give them any information to help them out? Is there things that you give them to coach them? And what is that?
So I'm actually going to start to repeat the question because that was one of the suggestions from one of the faculty panel that you might not hear. And the question is, when you go to ask a faculty member for a letter, do you give them material to help them out? And actually, instead of me repeating it, I'll ask you guys to repeat it. That's something that
I did give them the highlighted resume sort of thing, where I was giving them sort of, these are the things that I want, I'm proud of, these are the things that I would like you to keep in mind when you're writing this letter. And then some things were things that I would not necessarily have on a resume, but extracurricular stuff that I had been doing. So if I was involved with some community service, I would put that in and just like mention a couple of things that I've been up to. Sitting down with them and actually just saying, hey, this is what I've been doing with my life for the last 3 to whatever years was actually also helpful, I think.
So stuff that didn't necessarily pertain to classes you did with them, just stuff that you've done?
Yeah, so like projects that I've been working on. So not just stuff that I had done in class, but other stuff, right? Because I think I'd only actually taken a couple of classes, like 1 or 2 with them. So I didn't have the 7-class history with them. But I had been doing a lot of different kinds of projects. I would tell them about projects that I'd done in other classes, projects that I've been doing on my own, and work that I've been doing outside of the university also. So, yeah.
That didn't really come up for me because, I mean, the guy I took the least number of courses from, I took 5 courses from. So all of my letter of recs really knew me pretty well.
Yeah.
But I would have had they not, you know. And I have heard of, you know, good faculty members actually asking for it, even when the student didn't push it on them. So I would.
So all of my study abroad stuff also came into this, like all the things that I did at different universities that they would have no idea about. Like all of that stuff was things that I would talk to them about or mention.
And I usually ask students for such a set of points, so you can expect it. And the reason I do is to make sure nothing that you think is important gets left out. Please.
Do you need a list of all the schools you're going to be applied to before you ask them for the letter of recommendation?
With dates? Oh, yes, let me repeat that. So do you need to make a list of all the schools you're applying to before you start asking for letters of rec? Before you do the preliminary one, which you probably should start doing roughly now, you don't really need it. You just need to say, you know, you're basically looking for a yes or no in the first pass, right? Or to gauge their reaction. Another reason I would do it in person.
Right.
Look at their face when they agree and try to gauge that. But once you're really getting into it, really organize it. The schools you're applying to, the web page they have to go to, the date it's due by. And then the cool part is all these systems are pretty much online, and you get an email when they submit theirs and you check it off. And you might have to get, you can send reminders. And you might have to. I mean, I'm sure you're probably one that submits it very early, but there are many that submit it the day it's due. So,
I actually gave them a spreadsheet, and my spreadsheet had, I think it was school, potential faculty members I wanted to work with, the website of the school itself and the program, and what I wanted to do, and then the date.
I added recommended due dates.
Whoa, that's exciting.
Just a week earlier than all that.
Recommended due dates would be the way to go.
Like it was really a thing.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't.
Be persistent. Be really persistent.
Yeah. But
not too
annoying.
persistent.
Not annoying.
Like don't go doc every day, but like you should be aware that it's your responsibility to make sure that your letters go in. Because they have 1,000,001 things to do, and you're not.
And
really
if they
the
submit
top
them
of the
late,
chain.
it's not going to tank your application.
Right.
At least that was the impression I got. Pretty much.
I think you can also ask for extensions, depending on extenuating circumstances, right?
Because I definitely had some that were submitted late.
Yeah.
But definitely, there's a fine line between being persistent, which is good, and being a pest, which is bad. And you want to walk as close to the pest as you can without being a pest.
Exactly.
Come talk to me about that.
That's just general advice in general. You want to be as close to a pest without being a pest. Yes.
Please.
What's a good number of letters of recommendation?
3, 4.
So the question was, what's a good number of letters of recommendation? I think 3 that are your solid ones, and then if you can do an extra one, it's maybe 3 from research faculty, and maybe 1 from a lecturer or industry or something like that.
1 bonus.
Yeah, but 3 I think from research.
I know that some of you have to get to other classes while others would like to continue the discussion. So if anyone needs to leave for a class, it's now 12:50, please do so. And anyone who would like to stay here and get more pearls of wisdom is also welcome.
I know I had some friends who did ask more than 3, 4 people, so they asked 5, and then they split them up so that it wasn't, because I think they were applying to like 15 schools. That's kind of crazy, but if you are applying to a large number of schools and you are asking people who are busy, you might want to consider saying, this professor will do these 2 schools, this one will do these 2 schools, something like that, where you're sort of reducing the load on them also.
There was a question here.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the letters of rec, are they supposed to be different for each different school? Does each different school say you should have a set of requirements for what the graduate letter should contain and whatnot?
You probably know that more.
Okay, so the question is, when you're applying to many different schools, and basically what will happen is the professor will write 1 letter and then customize it to the particular school, but it will basically be the same letter. Each school will then have a different set of questions they ask about your creativity and your critical thinking and so forth. And so we'll fill those in separately. But basically, most of us will just write 1 letter, and then that will be the same letter that goes out to all your schools. Changing the name of the institution, of course.
So that's basically the same thing you're going to be doing when you write your statement of purpose and all these kind of things. Some of the schools will divide it differently. So they'll divide it maybe into 3 essays instead of 2 essays. And so those ones are a bit of a pain, but you still are just taking your core essay and massaging it. But you do want to start early because some of them are a little bit of a pain on how you have to break it up.
So I'm not sure if either of you were in this position, but let's say you were to take a year off to work in the industry or to do a project somewhere, and then you apply to grad school after. Would you stick with one of the professors? Would you keep in contact with them, or would you go back? I mean, how would that work?
So the question was, if you're taking a year off, keeping in contact with your professors. I have.
So, yeah. After I finished my undergrad, I actually ended up working with another professor in the department and just taking a grad course to tide me over, and working in industry for sort of the year that I was doing all my applications. So that gave me, because my program ended in December, and grad school in the US starts in September, so I had that chunk of time. And so I stayed involved both with the university and then sort of got a job to pay the bills while I was doing that. And funnily enough, that's when I ended up actually doing some sort of-ish research with the university to sort of make sure I was still active and actually doing the sorts of things that I would like to then start doing in September.
So when I graduated from undergraduate, I took a year off and worked for a year, and then I went around the world for a year, and then I spent the next 15 years in the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, and that worked very well for me. If you're thinking of doing something like that, I recommend that you ask your professors to write the letters right now, or at least as you graduate as a senior, while it's fresh in their mind, and then just say, please keep it on file, and then you'll have a nice fresh letter with all these glowing things that they still remember, instead of, let me see, I think I remember that.
So I guess my letters were fresh the first time, because I'm a one-time PhD dropout in math before switching to computer science. So in between the two, I taught local community colleges around here that many of you have probably gone to for 2 years. But so they, I assume, just rehashed their previous letters of rec. One asked if he should put that I'm a dirty quitter in there, but he didn't. But yeah, so I think that the fact of asking for him, even if you're gonna take time off.
Yeah.
Please.
I want to confirm that you are not allowed to see what they talk about as online
They don't have to show it to you, but they can.
No one's required to show it to you, but sometimes you'll see snippets of it because they'll say, did I capture this thing that you did right? But you don't really get much input into it.
I wouldn't want to see it. That's
Yeah.
awkward.
I feel uncomfortable with myself. Yeah.
One tried to show it to me, and I was just kind of like, nah, I trust it's fine.
Mine came in the inbox, and then I just didn't open
Yeah.
it because I would start, overanalyzing myself after that.
Yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't. Yeah. But you certainly have to sign that you wait for it to see.
Question, please.
Oh, I have a question like, how do you determine the highlights for different schools? Because you said highlights things.
Okay, so the question was, how did I determine what to highlight for different schools? It depended on what program I was applying for. So I think I was debating between different, I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do, and I initially thought I wanted to go into machine learning, but then as I started exploring different schools, I started finding out about sort of informatics and software engineering and all the other sort of disciplines. And so I would highlight projects that I did that were closest to that particular program. The sort of stuff that I did in my other life was general across, was the same for all of them. It was mostly just types of projects that I did. Right, so if I knew that a professor had a particular interest in operating systems, I would highlight that project that I did in undergrad. I think the main one that I ended up highlighting was when I was applying to the machine learning programs. I highlighted the paper that I wrote, and that was my biggest example.
Yeah, I don't think mine differed very much. But I mean, on the issue of highlighting, just something to think about is, I applied to all computer science programs under cryptography because it matched my background the most. I didn't do a day of cryptography. So you have flexibility. So just because you think, I mean, even someone with more grad experience than many of you did when I applied, I still switched 3 times while I was here before finding the group that I really wanted to work in. So you're not necessarily tied in.
So would you recommend maybe doing something like that? Because I mean, I know I want to go into machine learning, but I have a lot of background in embedded systems.
I was not okay, so the question is basically, I'm going to rehash that. Should you lie about what your interests are to get into a program? I don't think so.
You'll be found very quickly.
Yeah.
The first conversation, they'll ask you what this algorithm looks like, and you're like,
yeah. Well, I mean, even if you have the background, I don't think so, although I've heard of people doing it here in machine learning specifically because it's a hard group to get into. So I've heard of it happening. I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah. Be open.
Question in the back.
How many schools did you apply to, and when do you expect to graduate?
So I'll be graduating the question is, how many schools do you apply to? When do you expect to graduate? So I've met the graduation requirement for a little time. I've mostly just been puffing up my CV. So I'll be graduating in spring. I applied to 9 schools. That's what I was always told to apply to. 3 reach, 3 that are at your level, and 3 in case those other 6 are hateful. Kind of a situation. So that's kind of the system that I've stuck to both times I applied to grad school.
I did 2 rounds of applications because the first time I had no benefit of knowing what this process looked like. It's kind of weird being an international student in a small school. You don't know what the world looks like, and I didn't even know where half the American universities were. So I applied to 5 schools the first time, and then used that as my refinement process for learning how to do it, which is a terribly expensive way to do that. Be glad this stuff exists. So then the next time I did it, I actually realized that I should contact people, I should do this, and so I started applying better. And so I think I applied to 4 or 5 the second time as well. Because of my switch over, theoretically I can be here until 2017, but I would like to advance and graduate within the next year or so, because being 5th year is probably the longest I want to stay for now.
And I think, on that answer, I think most of the people that I know, I mostly only know people in theory and machine learning, so keep that in mind, but everyone seems to graduate in 5 or 6. So that seems to be the fairly typical time frame with, you know, not uncommon for people who aren't knowing they want to go to industry. And so they're doing the bare minimum research to get out. 4 seems fairly common. Oh yeah, I guess
I would say 4 to 7,
yeah.
depending on what you've done, how often you switched, did
Yeah.
you stay with the same advisor, right? So I think like there are several engineering students who I know who do some computation who did theirs in 4, but it was sort of like chop chop, I'm out of here, and they went and got jobs in industry, and that was grand. I switched, and so theoretically, if I were here for a sort of straightforward informatics degree, I would have been expecting to be wrapping up by now as opposed to advancing right now. So it really depends on how much jumping around you do and like how distracted you get by cool side projects.
I guess on that kind of like what we keep saying as though it's just an obvious thing that might not be obvious is your doctoral graduation requirement is like papers,
yeah,
not courses or anything like that. So that's like, so and that's why it is so variable, right? Sometimes it's hard to explain that to friends and family, like, well, how many years is a PhD? Well, it depends. So, you know,
when are you finishing, Kita?
Yeah, why aren't you finishing this year? Isn't it 5 years? Isn't it 4 years? It's not a year thing, it's a paper thing. And that's gonna be largely group dependent and subject dependent. From the people I know and the faculty I know, it seems to be roughly 3 papers where you are the primary contributor. That, at least, that's certainly our group's unofficial requirement, and that seems to be common. Is that common among?
It varies a lot.
Yeah,
Ours is
that's kind of what I
different.
assumed. Is it really very? And it might even
Ours
vary.
is different, so there
Yeah,
is
so
no
there you
like
go.
really
So,
even
variability.
unofficial requirement because we publish in a lot of conferences as opposed to journals, and so depending on how you count your conference papers, nobody really cares about your counting, and so ours sort of ends up being, so what's the grand thing that you did in the last year?
Yeah.
So I think we get yearly reviews, sort of checking in to make sure that we're not just doing too many side projects and actually sort of beginning to focus ourselves towards a particular goal.
So yeah, certainly our world is a bunch of separate papers which you staple together and call a thesis when you've done enough of them. So there's not usually a grand unifying topic, and this is upsetting to some of the grad students because they still don't really feel necessarily like an expert in one area. They're just kind of, they are.
Like my master's work no longer has anything to do with my dissertation project. The thing I did last year is now no longer, like it was helpful for my learning and all that kind of wonderful stuff, but it's not going to be in my dissertation, it's not going to be a chapter. It's just a thing that I did for fun's sakes.
Please.
So, how much time do you take on average to explore each program and decide on
It was a while.
Oh.
How long did you take to explore each program to figure out what ones you want to apply?
to figure out how it might work?
How it matched us. I feel like it was just like a continuous process over several months. I want to say 4, but it was a dark time that I don't remember very well anymore.
So the first time I was interested in a very specific area of mathematics, so I applied to the schools that did that. And then the second time was when I was teaching at the community colleges here, and it was right when the big budget cuts were happening, and I wasn't going to have like a job, so I applied to every UC. So different motivating factors both times, but that's not the best system because I ended up wasting money applying to UCs that I never would have gone to. And it's like $80 or something like that. That's $80 out the window to apply to a school that I never would have gone to. So, and I think, look at the faculty members. Look at faculty members you might want to work with, and then the next thing to look at is, do they already have 8 students? Because they may be a good match, there may not be room. So, you know, look at the faculty members. Also keep in mind that their web pages may be not up to date, and all those students may be
mostly
gone.
out of date.
So, but yeah, you're gonna have to work with this faculty member for 5 years, you have to get along with them. And I think that even goes when you enter grad school. If you're working with a faculty member and you do like their research, but you just can't get along with them, you're still probably going to have a better grad school experience working on something maybe you don't like as much with someone you like more.
This doesn't mean you have to meet them. So I never met anyone.
Same here.
I had Skype calls for the most part. And I think I only had 3 Skype calls with 3 faculty members that I was really excited about. And they're the ones who sort of like sent me along the little pipeline that got me here. And that was fine because so I ended up I worked with Bill Tomlinson and Deborah Richardson. And with Bill, what we ended up doing was, he had no idea who I was. I didn't know who he was. I knew his work. And so he was like, so we have this project. Do you want to write some code for it? And so I was, living in Fiji and I was like doing research. And so I said, sure. So I sat and wrote some code for 2 weeks and sent it back to him. And we sort of like de facto started working together. And he was like, sure, that sounds fun. And then we realized that it all worked out. Yes?
Well, I guess if you can do it, what we'd say about like maybe if you take a break after your undergraduate studies, that maybe during that break you to use that to maybe visit schools and talk to faculty and see
Ideally, assuming you don't have to.
Yeah.
If you are taking a break, you should probably take that time to like go visit faculty and visit departments and visit schools that you'd like to go and see.
So the thing about the break thing that always has concerned me, and why I know it's generally frowned upon in math grad school applications, is so as a theoretician, I spend all day writing proofs. You lose that skill. And if you don't write a proof for a year, it's going to be real hard to get back in the game, and you're going to be soft. Now, if you take a year off programming, and then you're going to go into a more systems grad school thing, program where you're going to be programming, no problem, you've been programming the whole year. So I think the year off could be dangerous if it's totally unconnected with what you're going to be doing in grad school.
Right.
Especially because you spent all this time undergrad building up these skills. And if you they go away fast.
Like I kept coding during my time off, but my math skills, they were shot by the time I started grad school.
Yeah.
So I suddenly had to like quickly remember all of the stuff that I used to be able to just do like that.
Yeah.
That now I was sort of struggling with. And so, like if I were to go back and figure out how I'd spend that time, in addition to like writing code and doing small projects, I would have made sure I didn't lose certain skills like my math skills.
Part-time tutoring would be a good way to keep that up.
I have to run.
Okay. I think we've reached the end of our time. Let's thank the panel.